You are listening to the Today's Eden Podcast, Episode 1. Hey, what's up, guys, and welcome to the Today's Eden Podcast show, the first episode ever. And I am so excited because the first person I'm interviewing, Deanne Hullender, has been a super influential woman, not only in my life, but my husband's life as well. An amazing Christian influence in my life. And she has been married for 27 years. They have two girls who are currently, one's currently in college and the other has already graduated. So she knows a few things about life. So I am so glad that you are here. I want this podcast to be all about inspiring, encouraging, educating, and empowering women. So let's get to it. Thanks for being on the show, Deanne. I hope you had an awesome day spending some one-on-one time with your daughter.
Absolutely. We call it Hannah Day and Haley Day when we get to spend the day together.
Well, and I didn't realize that it was tax-free weekend also. So, did you guys do some shopping?
Oh no! At this age, we decide that those are the days we stay out of the malls.
Oh yeah, I know. I feel you. My friends were texting me about the deals that they are finding, and is it worth the crowd? I don't know.
Sometimes it is when they're younger.
Yeah,
I'll give you
that's true. So why don't we get started and talk about your background and kind of give us an idea of who you are and what you're doing right now.
Okay. My name is Deanne Hullender. My husband is Chad, and he and I have been married about 27 and a half years. We have two girls. One is 23. She graduated from A&M, and I have a daughter that's currently at UT will be a junior this year, and she's headed back to school tomorrow.
Oh my gosh. I can't believe the summer's almost over already. Or over, I guess.
It is. It's done.
So what are you enjoying during this stage of life with your kids at college? Just you and your husband?
Well, one of the things that Chad and I both have truly enjoyed is seeing the girls grow into who we have always dreamed for them to be. It's a time that we now can spend together, and we have a whole lot more one-on-one time together. But we both truly look forward to the times that we do get to spend together as a family, because those times are so few and far between.
Yeah, I know. I know that just knowing you guys through church and having you guys as our nearly Sunday school teachers, it was a huge impact on Dalton and I and how our marriage functions today and everything. So I know that one of the big things that we took away is that we appreciated is just that your guys' honesty about having disagreements. And just that even the perfect couple, like even if you think it's a perfect couple, even they have disagreements. Like no matter what it looks like on the outside, everybody's having disagreements. So how do you guys, or how over the years have you and your husband learned to fight better?
Well, I'll tell you what has really helped is being a part of a young married class and being able to hear the right way to do things. Mm-hmm. When you hear that over and over again, you tend to get better and better at it. But, over the years, I think that you grow into realizing that marriage is not whether one or the other wins or loses. It is coming together as a team. And when you see your marriage as a team, and then you also see your family as a team, then you don't want the other one to lose. It's one of those things that you just want to bring them alongside you. So you go about disagreements. You're not going to agree on everything. You're not going to see eye to eye on every single issue that comes along. But if you can think about how can I express what I want to express without offending, then I think you've won.
Mm-hmm. So how do you choose on which ones, like, you let things go? Or, if you are holding true to, your side of the story or your side of the situation and he has another side, then how are you deciding, okay, I'm just going to let this go? Or how do you move on?
There are several things that we've done over the years. Sometimes whenever there is no way that we're going to agree at that point, we take some time and we kind of walk away from that moment, mm-hmm. and we kind of regroup and give ourselves some time. I think that you continue to find that balance. You continue to find that place that you can come together. And when I find that I do a lot more listening than I do talking, then I learn a lot. And it's one of those things that both of us have agreed that, you know what, if we just listen a little bit more, some of our most intense issues have been over a misunderstanding of how it was said. Like he said, this is what I heard. Well, that's not what I meant. And those are the kinds of things that I realize so many things come from and then just escalate.
Okay, so it's a big deal to kind of stop and say, like, okay, this is what I'm hearing you say. Tell me if this is right, or clarify, I guess. Just having that kind of discipline to be able to stop and say, like, let's clear it up a little bit.
Absolutely, and that really has been the biggest thing, because when he hears how I heard what he said, he will stop and say, oh, absolutely not, that's not it. And that is not something we did early on in our marriage. Early on in our marriage, it was, I know exactly what you meant by that. And
yeah. We all know how that goes. So at what point did you guys decide to start approaching disagreements that way? Or like what triggered, something has to change, or we got to do it differently, or, this is how to better...
Well, Chad came from a family that did not discuss things out loud. They didn't argue. They just kind of ignored things. I came from a family where you just yelled it out if you had to. So the first thing we did was we kind of came together and said, we've got to find a balance in that. Because he really didn't like the strong, tone, and I didn't like ignoring a situation. So that was the first thing. But when we started teaching and started working through some of the curriculum that we go through, and when we learned how much sweeter and how more meaningful marriage can be when you do find that common ground, it's a huge motivator. And I'll tell you, when your kids get to about the junior high age, that marriage needs to be tight because you have so many other things coming at you at that point.
Yeah, I'm not ready for junior high. Mine are little still, so I can't even begin to think about boys or training bras or any of that. Like, I don't even want to think about that right now. So 27 years, that's a long time. I'm like, I can't wait for the day that we eventually, hopefully, God willingly, that we get there. But so far, what has been the sweetest part of your marriage?
I think just growing every year and seeing both of us, whether it's in our careers or it's our role as parents or even our roles in the church, I think just seeing us grow into what we feel like God wants for us. I am so proud of Chad when he accomplishes something at work and he feels good about that, and he is, just as proud of me whenever I go through things like that. But I think, watching our kids grow, going through those things together, there's just this moment that we can just kind of sit down and say, you know what, we have done our best and we've put God first, and we're going to watch it play out.
So do you think that it's important that you guys kind of stay in tune, or like interested in each other's, like what's going on in each other's work life, and like other things that are outside of, the relationship between you two?
Absolutely. I think, if I could kind of focus on what I felt was missing when the kids were home, is that both of us put our attention on them, and we didn't give each other enough attention one-on-one. And so now when we come home, it's like, tell me about your day, and I want to hear every detail.
Right.
And vice versa, instead of it. Now, don't get me wrong. I loved having my children home, and I loved those times. I asked Hannah not too long ago what kept communication going on in our family, and she said it was eating dinner together. And so that was great. But now the two of us have dinner, just the two of us, and we end up communicating the way we did even as a family.
Yeah. So I had another question for you about protecting your marriage and just the privacy of it, and how did that look like when you guys were first dating? What were the steps you guys took to just, keep that intimacy, or keep the, not intimacy, but what's the word I'm looking for?
Just protecting the relationship?
Yeah.
Well, one of the things that's something I did not do well at first. It was something that was probably driven by the people that I was around, whether it was at work or even some just my friends. It's very easy to get with your girlfriends and complain about what your husband does, whether it's not picking up his clothes or not squeezing the toothpaste right, all the way to bigger things.
So now we know what you do, Chad.
So one of those things that I realized was I was nagging to them about him, And there was just an aha moment one time when he kind of overheard some of it, and he said, I don't ever want us to dishonor each other in front of other people. He said, I want to build you up in front of other people. And it was a huge pause for me, because I thought, oh, that's not what I mean to do. I'm just kind of airing my frustrations, but I had no idea what it would do to him. And so I think when you pause and say, you know what, those are not the people that I need to air to. You know, if I have an issue, air it to the person that you have the issue with. So I think it's a maturity thing, because that's not something I did well. But we talk about that all the time, and we talk about how that made us feel and how we keep from doing that in the future.
So for daughters who are close to their mothers, good or bad, should they come to their mom and talk about their marital things with their moms or their family?
I'm not going to say don't talk about anything, because I do think that there's wisdom there. I just would caution and say that whatever you say, that parent is going to remember. And so that might be, and blood is thicker than water, and they are going to stick together. And so that parent is going to side, so to speak, with their child. But when it comes to advice, and you know that you've got a parent that has that wisdom, absolutely. But I would say find someone that loves your spouse as much as you do, that will not hold anything against them.
How would you suggest that somebody finds somebody to talk to or to confide in that's kind of outside the circle?
You know, I didn't find that person for a very long time, but I have a dear friend who's older than my mother, that just loved my husband's family, and so she is the one that I end up confiding in, because I know she's not going to always take my side. She's going to let me see that other side. So I think if you have some sort of mentor or someone that loves both of you equally, then that can be a safe place. But I would also say that let it be someone who does look to God and look to the Word for that wisdom, because they're going to direct you in that right path.
Okay. What do you think about Facebook now that we have Facebook and all these social media things? How do you suggest couples protect their marriage now with all that going on? Because it seems to be a lot of the times you look on your feed and you see somebody kind of airing their dirty laundry, and you just kind of scroll over like, oh, like she didn't, you know.
Well, coming from the career that I have, and just social media in general being something that can get you into all kinds of trouble, I err on the side of that is not what social media is for. Social media is not a place to go into those areas with your spouse. But I also, on the other side of it, don't paint a perfect picture.
Right.
So much of that goes on, and there's so much angst, I think, in our culture today, because what is on Facebook is only the best picture. It's not reality. It's the best picture that person has chosen, or it's the most frustrating story.
Right.
So I would say just use common sense and use wisdom before posting.
Yeah, I think that's one big thing that I've kind of felt called to be is not the picture perfect Facebook family, that like it's okay for us. I'm not gonna say like, oh, this is what's going on with, like, we just had an ugly fight today, but I mean, I might say something like about it being tough, or marriage is hard sometimes, or, you know, but not being specific about, but being honest enough to where people are aware that things look good, but we struggle too, just like everybody else.
Absolutely. And I think that sometimes this culture is missing the reality, that there's a false sense of reality.
Yeah, our version of reality, or TV's version of reality, is the Kardashians, which are, you know, all those other shows, The Bachelorette, which I can't deny that I watch or don't watch. I'm not gonna. So, how did you raise your children in a God-loving household where you guys were open about your faith, encouraging them in your faith, but also letting their faith be their own?
You know, one of the things that, and this goes back to how I was raised, I did my best and tried hard to let them make decisions. If they came to me with a question, then I let them work through that question on their own by asking them additional questions than just telling them how it should be. I wasn't always perfect at it, but when you allow a young, preteen or a teenager to work through those issues at an early age, then when they are 16 and older, then they will have already worked in their mind. What I did not want to do is make my faith their faith. I wanted their faith to be their own. And so I think just now I will say I've asked several people in my life older than me. I just ask them, how did you raise such wonderful children? You know, I want to know that from my parents' peers. And they really do go back to finding that core group of friends that is faith-based, and those faith-based solid friends that you keep your kids around. Their parents are raising them the same way and letting them make some of those decisions early on too.
Right. So I think that's something that I've noticed too, getting older, is our circle between Dalton and I is getting smaller, and a big part of that is what they're, how they're parenting or what they're doing on the weekends, and how does that affect the way that we're making decisions, or how does that view to our kids. So I think that
absolutely,
that's played a big part in things too. But so when you had your kids and they were smaller, what did your family work, like faith or family work and church life balance look like? Because I know that it can be crazy.
It can, and again, I'll tell you, I did not do it perfect all the time. You get to a point, if you have some of the strengths that God has given us, and if you have leadership, if you have administration, then you will be asked to do a lot of things. And Chad and I both were asked to do a whole lot in the church, and there were times that I did feel overwhelmed because I wanted to do so much for the kids when they were younger, and I was running them around everywhere, and I was going in so many different directions. But I finally got to a point where I thought, I've got to start saying no. Being a pleaser, I just, say yes a lot. But I sat down, and we as a family said, okay, what do we need? Eating dinner together, whether it was at Chick-fil-A or around our own table, we still wanted to be together. And so that drove a lot of our decisions. It's like, okay, you might be going to gymnastics and you might be going to BSF, but we are going to at least connect and have dinner together. So I think just finding that balance and figuring out what your family needs. Now, you might not be able to do dinner every night. It was not every night for us. But it's just finding that balance. And then I never wanted my girls to feel like work came before them. But sometimes it did. Sometimes I had to be at places. But I always wanted one of us to be there. And so Chad would find a way to fill in when I could not be.
So I guess that would be tougher if you're a working mom. So how did you kind of deal with, like, I need to do all these things, I feel an obligation to, and maybe a desire to do my job, but yet I also want to make sure that my kids, I'm there for them and that they know that I love them. And
well, it's tiring, and for a working parent, nighttime can be. I would stay in my work clothes and I would tuck them in, still dressed for work, because I did not have time for that. But I have to go back to the spouse. Chad could have chosen many different ways to go in his career, and he ended up choosing to do more at home than he did away. And so sometimes those big decisions are made so that you will spend that time at home.
So obviously, you talked about spending time in the church and kind of having those like leadership qualities, and that called you guys more to be at the church. So how did you decide that was worth sacrificing the time away or from your family and other things?
Well, I'll say this. It's a bit easier to do it when they're younger, because you know that they can go to this class, or they can go to Mission Friends, or they can go to choir, and they're involved. When they were about late junior high to high school is when I started saying no. And that's when I realized if I was going to see them, I was going to have to be more available in the evenings and things like that. So that was the time that I felt like I pulled away from those church responsibilities to make sure that I was available for them. I will tell you that the minute that they head to college and you don't have them at home anymore, you have a lot of time to donate to the church.
Yeah. So right now, what is your involvement in the church that you're in right now?
At this time, Chad and I both teach together the young marrieds, and we don't direct, we teach. And so right now we're cultivating some other teachers, and we're still driving the curriculum. Chad is currently the personnel chair of the personnel committee at church, which puts him on the finance committee, it puts him on the advisory council, and then I have been asked to head up a leadership development team, because our church has made it very important to have leadership and cultivate leaders from the millennial age. And so those are two big things that we're doing now, and so that and also being a part of the worship ministry. But you again, the balance. You really have to stop and ask God, okay, what gifts have you given me, and where do I need to use them? Because I've done things in the past that I wasn't gifted. I just did them because someone asked me and I couldn't say no. And I think if you can figure out what you're gifted to do and do those things, then it just works out perfectly. And God can actually multiply your time when you're serving Him.
Right. Do you think that if you're involved in your church, that it would be wise for you to, or if you go to church, to get more involved in your church, to invest your time, whether it's serving, volunteering, or?
Absolutely. I think we're called to love others and make disciples, and so whatever that looks like, it can look different for other people. Not everyone is gifted in teaching the way Chad is, and so I think you just find what it is that you do, that God has gifted you to do, and you do that well. But it can mean many different things when you look at all the opportunities you have. But spending time in your church and becoming invested allows you to not only create relationships, and not only in community groups and spread that, but those relationships can become deep, and you can actually get to the discipleship part.
Yeah. I'm curious, have you ever talked to your girls about how they've watched you guys kind of serve in the church over the years, and if it's impacted them or what they've thought about it? Or
Absolutely. Interestingly enough, Hannah came home from her ministry that she did this summer for 9 weeks, and I asked her, I said, I want you to compare what you did, which was a discipleship program, to the church. And she said, a part of what we do at church, there's a piece missing, and that is sharing the gospel on a regular basis. Mm-hmm. And so we've really had some deep conversations about how sometimes we can just go to church and you're just going and everyone is busy. Mm-hmm. You're very busy about it, but you're not necessarily sharing the gospel on that regular basis. And so I've been challenged even recently that yes, that is important, and both of my girls see the importance of being involved in the church. But I think that the outreach portion is something that they see and they have communicated to me is very important at this age.
So sharing the gospel more and more every day with their friends, and I'm assuming that that's helped them pick better friends or make better choices.
Well, and I think that the things that you stay involved in, Haley recently, she lives in Fort Worth now, and she recently went to her community group, and she actually called me and she said, I haven't been able to go in 6 weeks, and she said, I went tonight and I feel so much better about things because I was able to share and I was able to learn. And she even asked about scripture memory, and she said, I want to find a way to memorize scripture better. So that is a testimony to having that community and being involved, and even the accountability that is built into that.
Kind of like that saying, iron sharpens iron.
That's exactly right.
Mm-hmm. So what is your favorite part about your relationship with your daughters now that they're older and in college and not as home as much?
Aside from the fact that they're not quite as expensive.
I didn't know that ever changed.
When they get their own job and they start paying for their own gas, it's a wonderful thing. No, I would say just backing off. I'll tell you this story. My children had their typical high school times, and they had to grow through some of the decisions that they made. And I had someone tell me, and he happened to be a doctorate in psychology, he said, once your child is 16, you have pretty much taught them all that you're going to be able to teach them in the basics.
Oh my gosh.
He said, you're done.
That's stressful.
And at the time, one of mine was 17, and I went, are you kidding me? I can't be done. You can't tell me that. But I thought back and I thought that it probably is true, because at that 16-year-old age, they could be driving a car, they're making decisions on their own, and that's what you do is you work up to that point, and you hope and pray that what you've given them they can take with them and make the good choices. So I say that to say I love the 23-21 because I get to watch them live out, and I get to watch them make the good choices, and I get to watch them grow. And they are going to make mistakes. They're not perfect at all. But just being able to be friends with them, because I really wasn't friends with them until they did get past that 16 to 18 point.
So I would say that it's safe to say that you would think that you can't be friends with them until they get past a certain point. Like, I'm a parent and that's it until... What age did you kind of make the switch of?
It really was going off to college. It was at that point that I just kind of relaxed a little bit. You know, children want boundaries, and children want a parent. They're going to have a lot of friends, and there's plenty of time to be friends with your kids. But my experience is it was just fine for me to be the excuse. Mm-hmm. You know, use me as an excuse. Let me be the bad guy, because they really have that desire to have that boundary.
I guess that's going to be the biggest struggle today, is that other kids are doing this and that, and they're going to come to you asking you to do something. So how did you handle those situations when their friends are all out doing XYZ and it's not fair, Mom, you know, why can't I? Or...
Well, I handled it a couple of ways. If I knew something was coming, that I planned something else, and I had it already figured out, and, you know, there was no reason to go to that party because we're going to Grandma's. But, you know, you try to stay one step ahead of that. Someone told me something the other day that kind of rung in my mind, and I wish I had known it back when they were younger. But they said, so many times we say, because I said so. You know, why can't I do this? Why? Because I said so. And a better way to say that is because I love you. Mm-hmm. And communicate to them that they may not understand why you're saying no, but you love them, and that's the why, and sometimes they'll understand that. I will also say that sometimes you can actually point out to them and let them see things. I'll give you a perfect example. When there was something that I wanted to do, and let's just take smoking, for instance. Not that I ever asked my mother if I could smoke, but Mom would say, it's expensive, it's bad for your health. You know, it wasn't because I said so. She would point out some things and say, look over there, you know, or do you remember so-and-so, they have bad breath. I mean, just using examples of showing them not just, no, I'm telling you can't do that, but here's the why behind it. I think that's huge.
So less of an authoritative, like, approach to it, and more of like, because
conversation.
Conversation. Mm-hmm. So that's probably a big factor in why you guys are so close, is that you were willing to have more conversations instead of just saying, like, this is the way it is.
Absolutely. But I got to go back to what I said about the marriage thing too. There are 2 ears and 1 mouth, and so you listen to your kids a whole lot more than you tell them what to do.
And so probably when they're older, that's when that changes too, because right now they're younger, and I feel like I'm doing more of the authoritative way versus the listening.
You're absolutely right. And there's seasons of that. I mean, you're in that season, but there will come a time when they don't say as much, and you have to pull out of them what's going on in their head. And so there are good questions to ask. You know, not how was your day, but tell me the best thing that happened to you today. So there's two. You know, you're still trying to get to the same thing, but they're going to tell you the best and the worst thing before they're just going to say it was fine.
Do you have any golden nugget questions that you can think of using in those situations?
Well, I asked the girls several years back, and one of them said that anytime we had dinner, I'd let them invite friends over, and we would eat too, and we played a game all the way through junior high and high school. We played the game of the table. You've probably heard about it, but it's called high-low. And everyone at the table had to go around and tell their high for the day and their low for the day. And, of course, it can get real routine, and they would roll their eyes like, here we go again. But one of my daughter's friends said that made him feel so at home because someone actually wanted to know the best and the worst thing that happened to them today.
Aww.
And so if you can just figure out what it is that pulls that information out of your kids, it's so beneficial.
What age did you start doing that
at? We started early, and I would say probably, I mean, I remember even in, elementary, just saying, what was your happiest moment and what was your saddest moment?
So would you say the biggest factors that helped foster your relationship with your girls, that kept it close and open between you guys?
I think just listening. I vividly remember a time where Haley had walked in the house and she was not a happy camper. And I had been at work all day and her sister was annoying her. And she snapped at both of us and went straight to her room. And I was headed back to take care of it. I was going to tell her that was disrespectful and she was not going to treat us that way. And I'm sure God intervened on my way in there. And I thought, you know what, something's going on. So I walked in. And I said, "What's going on?" And I just held her, and she just melted in my arms because it was things that had happened to her that day that caused that. And so I ended up doing a whole lot more listening in the next 15 to 20 minutes than what I had planned on doing.
So maybe just being more aware of, and how can we be more aware of what's going on in our kids' lives? Like I know now with all these social media stuff and with school, I'm kind of overwhelmed. Like I feel like I need to keep up with it all, but how do I keep up with what's going on and what, like I remember when LOL first came out and it's like, my mom had no idea what that was. And now there's other things coming out and I'm like, no, this is too soon already.
I think you just keep asking them questions too. Get them to tell you what's going on. There's a thing that takes place in my school district that I work for, and it's a mentoring, it's an hour that all the kids have. It's called Trojan Talk. And these mentors just ask questions, and these kids tell them some of the most interesting things just because they ask. So I would just say, just keep asking questions. Don't become annoying, but ask the questions and be inquisitive, because if you can keep them talking from first grade on, then you'll know what's going on.
That's great. So I think that's going to be a struggle, or something that I'm concerned about, is being sure that I'm like careful with that balance, that I'm not nagging too much, because I don't want to nag too much to where they don't want to tell me, but yet I want to ask enough questions to where we do create that relationship.
Absolutely, and you'll know. I'm not going to say that I never annoy my children. I know I do. But I think that's where your husband comes in, is just making that balance, because about the time that you feel like, okay, maybe I need to back off, then he can step in.
Was there a time that you and your husband kind of had to kind of discuss what was going on between the kids, or how to be on the same team? Because I know that sometimes, or in a lot of households, it's like the mom says this, but then the dad says that. So how did you guys stay on the same page as in parenting?
We started before they were even born. We talked about that, and we said we will not allow them to put one of us against the other. It's a partnership, it's a team, and it's not one winning. Just like I said at the beginning, it's not one winning or the other losing. But when a family, when the kids see that mom and dad stand together, then it doesn't really even happen. They don't try very often because of that. Because kids want their parents to love each other, and they want their parents to be happy. And so if you can keep that in mind, then that stability and that base is there.
I've noticed that even in my youngest, my 3-year-old, sometimes out of nowhere, he'll just come and grab my hand and go and grab, daddy's hand, and makes our hands together. And to me, that's like a huge thing. Like, wow, he knows that's before he's even, grown enough to understand what it means. He knows that it's important, or at least important enough for him to do.
Which probably is a reflection because he loves to hold your hand.
That's probably true. He is a mommy's boy. But so I also had another question about, I think one of the things that we learned from your class was more focusing on that it's not an I marriage, because I know that when my husband and I got married, we were doing that. We didn't realize that we were thinking about me, and this is what I need, and this is what I should be doing, until you guys made us aware of, and I can't remember the study that it was.
It's called I marriage.
Oh, okay. That makes sense.
Little I marriage.
Okay, yeah. So how would you suggest to couples to be aware that that's what they're doing, or kind of what are the signs of, hey, you might be less of a we, and you might need to do something about that?
Well, that study is golden. It really is. And I think one of the things that was an aha for us was when you go into a relationship where one is, in a sense, parenting the other, then it is no longer that partnership. It becomes one over the other. And I think sometimes just some of our personalities tend to dominate that way, or if someone speaks louder, you can get into that. But when you start having expectations of your spouse and you start pointing out that they're not meeting those expectations, then it does go into that parenting form of a relationship and can be very, very, very hurtful and can really destroy some of the things that you start out with. At the base of most issues is a selfishness. And I think when both sides realize that and come back to, okay, what do we really want? We really want this relationship, we want this team, and I'm willing to let go of what I expect, and if that other is willing to let go of what they expect, then it ends up just being a sweet time, and you end up serving one another rather than expecting to be served.
So is there anything in particular that you and Chad do on a daily basis or on a monthly basis that keeps you guys intimate or close or communicating better?
After 27 years, the things that they don't really enjoy talking about or the things that are important. And so just as recently, I will tell you that finances are something that stress me out. And with 2 kids in college, that tends to loom a little bit. And it's the thing that Chad hates to talk about the most. But he has said, okay, I'm going to share with you where we are financially, even though I don't really like to talk about it. I don't want to deal with it, just because he knows that's important to me. It kind of turnabout is he's all about having fun. He's about going places and doing things and all of that. So there's a balance there where I'm able to give and say, okay, I want to meet that need. Let's plan a trip together. Let's do something fun together. Let's just, ride bikes. And he, on the other hand, talks about what I need to talk about. So I think when you find what that other person, what their passion is, or what they want and what they feel is important, you try to meet that need, it can make all the difference in the world.
So let's talk about more of your personal life, like just you, Deanne. So what forms of self-love do you practice now that the girls are out of the house?
I am an introvert. I know that it doesn't seem like I'm the typical introvert, but after a full day of PR and being with people all day in meetings, my happiest moment sometimes, my little nugget, is and Chad has done some traveling lately, is to come home alone to an empty house and turn on my favorite show and eat popcorn and drink my favorite drink, and I'm by myself. I would say that would be my little pleasure that I enjoy.
And speaking of shows, something I did want to ask you that I had forgotten to ask you earlier when we were talking about raising children and stuff is recently with the Dallas shootings, and I thought about this earlier and I forgot to bring it up, but I know with us, with a 3-year-old and a 6-year-old, we have had conversations, my husband and I, about what do we share with them? What do we let them kind of hear about first? And then, do we bring it to them? Do we wait? Do we kind of talk to them about what's really going on? Or how do you handle those situations?
Well, interestingly enough, 9/11 happened when my youngest was in kindergarten. And before we got a chance to even talk to her, one of the kids in her class ran in and just told the whole class. And so she came home that evening telling us before we got a chance to talk about it. So always know that in today's world with social media and the immediate communication that we have today, that you're going to have that. You're going to have your kids knowing things earlier than what you would want them to. But what we did was we just simply and honestly shared. Now, my opinion and what I did was I left out the gory details. We talk about evil, we talk about sin, we talk about there is that in the world and it's unfortunate. And we never want anyone to be afraid. We didn't want the children to be afraid, but there is a sense of fear that is out there just because there is the evil and the sin out there. So I would just say be as honest as you can, but I will also say let them ask you the questions. Don't offer too much, because if it's in their little brains, they're going to ask it 9 times out of 10. So just test the waters and see before you just tell them everything.
Another thing about parenting and being a mom, I know that a lot of conversations that I've seen is, a lot of mom shaming situations, whether it's, and I don't think a lot of it is intentional, but still, how did you kind of stay out of that, or how, as you were growing in motherhood, did you keep your head above the water from like, this is what I'm doing and I'm not going to focus on what everybody else says I should be doing?
Yeah, I would say because knowing where social media has taken us today and seeing some of the things that these young mothers are faced with because they see it on Facebook or wherever, for some reason I was able to say, oh, that's not me, and just kind of move from it. Um, I would say just strengthen your relationship with your spouse to where you know where the two of you stand on things, and don't let that noise on the outside rattle you. Know who you are, and know what is important to you, and know where you want to go, and let that guide you. And that's what I called it. I just called it noise. Many things. A perfect example is disciplining your children. Mm-hmm. Everyone is going to do that differently, and when you figure out what you want to do and how you want to do it, then stand firm with that and don't feel guilty about it.
But also, would you say that not to take a side when it's like a friend that's doing it a different way, kind of just be like, okay, that's your thing, but I'm going to do my thing? How do you, is that
That is exactly it. That's because I remember it was, breastfeeding, not breastfeeding. It was spanking, not spanking. So many different things that you can talk about. Sometimes you just don't have to talk about it. Sometimes you don't have to share your opinion. And if someone is on a roll, you say, you know what, that's your opinion, and we don't have to talk about that. Many situations I was in where I was doing a whole lot more listening than talking, knowing full well that might not be how I do it, but I knew I wasn't going to change their mind.
So just kind of letting their way be their way and your way be your way.
That's exactly right.
So now I think that was such great information, like all of that. I know that my husband and I, we always talk about how do we want to be like them. So that was awesome to be able to hear all those things. Let's do a few rapid fire questions real quick. So how would you define marriage in a sentence?
I think I have to go back to just that team. Marriage is a team. God has brought you together for a purpose, and figure out what that purpose is together.
And if you could tell your 30-year-old self one thing, or really any, 20, whatever age you pick, one thing, what would it be?
For me personally, I would tell myself to relax, that the things that I thought were so important and the things that bothered me so badly really weren't, because you can look back after 27 years of marriage and say that just wasn't quite as important as I thought it was.
And what is your one guilty pleasure?
That would be that coming home and watching my show and being alone.
And what book has been the most influential, and why?
One of the things that we teach in our class, and it's the first class it's the first part of our curriculum, is the 5 love languages. That book changed our life, changed our marriage, it changed our families, because all of our extended families read it too. And it's such a golden book to figure out what it is that is important to the other person and what's important to you, and let each other know what that is, and you can speak that love into that person the rest of your life.
Who would you suggest that book is good for?
That book is good for anyone. They even have the 5 love languages for children. They have it for teenagers. They have it for extended family. Chad was on a flight not too long ago and sat down next to a guy, and there was a seat in between them, and they both looked at each other like, okay, please do not let that seat fill up. And it didn't. And so a little bit later, they kind of connected, and the other guy just started crying, and just tears were flowing down his face. And Chad thought, oh, great, what is going on now? But he ended up, reaching out to him, and the guy was having trouble in his marriage. And Chad said, I have a book for you. Why don't you go get this book by Gary Chapman, 5 Love Languages? I really think that you would enjoy it. So they exchanged business cards, and within about 2 or 3 weeks, Chad received an email from this guy that said, you have no idea how much that helped me and my wife. He said, it made a huge difference in our lives. So I would say that would be the number one book to start with, and it's one that you can share with just about anybody.
For those who don't know what, or haven't heard what the 5 love languages book is, can you describe what the gist of it is?
You are provided, whether it's, your personality or God-given gifts, but there are ways that you express love well, and there are ways that you receive love well. And they have narrowed it down to 5: quality time, acts of service, gifts,
I can't remember either. Okay, wait. Quality time, acts of service,
touch, gifts, and
what's the 5th one?
Oh, words of affirmation.
Oh, yeah, that's
of course, the one that is Chad's.
Hopefully he doesn't listen to this, because apparently you're not paying too much attention to it.
You notice I got mine right. But what you do is that usually how a person shows love is how they receive love. And so, as an example, Chad is fabulous at affirming me with words, because that's something that he really needs in his life, and that's what speaks love to him. I, on the other hand, I am acts of service, and so I do things for people, and that's my way of showing love to them. And so when your spouse does the language, or speaks the language that you speak, it is astronomical, the changes that can take place in a relationship when you know that person, that might not be what they're the best at, but they're doing it for you.
Mm-hmm. I know that's the first time that we got introduced to the 5 love languages was in your guys' class, and we had no idea that was even a thing. Like, we just loved each other how we thought we were supposed to love each other, and we had no idea that we actually needed different things. Mm-hmm. And so I know that my husband is touch, and I'm more words of affirmation, and so I would tell him, like, good job and stuff, but what he really wanted was for me to hold his hand, or to hug him more, and stuff like that. But I had no idea. But that did change our marriage and just bring us closer and be better. Especially, I think it even helped during, like, fighting. And
oh, absolutely. And a perfect example is my youngest. Hers is touch. And even as a baby, I can remember back where she would be in the back in her car seat crying, and all I had to do was reach back and touch her, and she would settle down. And so I think that is there at a very young age.
So that was probably her, like, this is my safe.
Mm-hmm.
You just got to make me feel
I'm
safe.
here.
And yeah.
I'm here, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well, that's great. Well, thank you so much for taking the time out to talk with me and share this great information. And hopefully we can do it again soon.
Sounds good.
Thanks for listening. For today's show notes for this episode, go to todayseden.com/podcast, todayseden.com. Also, make sure to check out the blog. I write about all sorts of stuff on there, life stories, health, wellness, you name it. So make sure you check that out. Until next time, do what they think you can't do.